Eleanor Morgan had always been invisible in Whispering Pines, and that's exactly how she preferred it. The small Montana town, nestled between jagged mountains and endless forests, was the perfect place for someone with secrets to disappear, where everyone knew everyone's business except hers. For 7 years, she'd run Morgan's precision gunsmithing from a weathered log cabin on the outskirts of town, repairing hunting rifles and crafting custom scopes with hands that trembled like autumn leaves in a breeze, hands that the locals often mocked behind her back, never suspecting these same unsteady fingers had once changed the course of wars. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. Every morning before dawn, townspeople heard the same sound. Drifting from behind her workshop, the crisp report of a single rifle shot echoing through the pines. They called it Eleanor's alarm clock, joking that an old woman with hands that shook so badly could never hit what she was aiming at. If only they knew how deadly her accuracy truly was, even now. Eleanor was 67, but carried herself with the disciplined posture of someone who'd never forgotten military bearing. Her silver hair was always pulled back in a practical bun, and her pale blue eyes held a watchfulness that made people instinctively straighten their spines when she looked their way. She wore the same outfit every day: khaki pants, sensible boots, and a faded flannel shirt with sleeves rolled precisely to the elbow, revealing forearms corded with lean muscle unusual for a woman her age. A thin scar traced her right cheekbone, barely visible but always there, like a signature she couldn't erase. The townsfolk had theories, of course. Some whispered she was a widow who'd lost her husband to hunting accident. Others suspected she'd fled an abusive relationship. Old Frank at the general store swore she'd been in the military, pointing to the way she still stood at attention whenever the national anthem played at community events. But Eleanor answered only what needed answering, maintaining an invisible barrier that said, "This far and no further." What they didn't know was what sat hidden in the underground bunker beneath her workshop, concealed by a trapdoor covered with a heavy workbench that could be moved with a hidden hydraulic system. Inside that underground space, which didn't appear on any property records, was a collection of specialized rifles that would have shocked the sleepy town. Precision weapons meticulously maintained, some dating back decades, each with a history of impossible shots that had changed world events without ever making headlines. Eleanor had spent years perfecting each weapon, calibrating scopes to compensate for the tremor in her hands, rebuilding trigger mechanisms to respond to her unique touch. The rifles had no serial numbers, no official registration, but etched faintly inside each wooden stock was a single word: Artemis. Every Sunday evening when the shop closed and the town settled into its weekend rituals, Eleanor would descend into her hidden range and take up her favorite rifle, a custom M24. With modifications no civilian should have access to. She would steady her trembling hands on the familiar grip, the tremors momentarily calming as muscle memory took over. In those moments, she wasn't Eleanor Morgan the gunsmith. She was someone else entirely. On this particular Monday, storm clouds gathered on the horizon, not just weather, but something that would shatter the quiet life she'd built. Eleanor was deep in concentration, reassembling the firing pin on a client's hunting rifle, when she heard vehicles approaching, not local trucks with their familiar rumble. These had military-grade engines and moved with a precision that made her blood run cold. She slid the unfinished rifle under her workbench, wiping oil from her trembling hands as 2 black SUVs rolled up the gravel path. No license plates, no markings. 4 men stepped out in synchronized movement, followed by a distinguished officer in dress uniform who surveyed the area like he expected to find exactly what he was looking for. They didn't introduce themselves. The officer simply looked at her workshop, then at her shaking hands, and smiled with the confidence of someone holding all the cards. "You're Eleanor Morgan," he said, not a question. She didn't answer, just met his gaze with the steady calm she'd perfected over years of practice. His smile widened. "We need to talk." Behind her, hidden under a false panel in the wall, hung the ghillie suit she hadn't worn in 15 years, still packed with the precision of military training. And for the first time in 7 years, Eleanor felt the past reaching through the shadows to reclaim her. The officer stepped closer, his boots crunching on gravel. "We know who you really are, Artemis, and we need your help." The name hit like a physical blow, but Eleanor's expression never changed. Some secrets, she'd learned, had a way of finding you no matter how deep you buried them. And this one had just walked onto her property wearing stars on his shoulders and knowing smiles. "I think you have the wrong person," she said quietly. But deep in her workshop, her fingers instinctively reached for the hidden switch that would lock down her property if necessary. And Eleanor Morgan, the woman who had never existed in any official record before 7 years ago, knew her carefully constructed life in Whispering Pines was about to end. The officer's name was General Robert Hargrove, and he carried himself with the authority of someone who'd built his career on never accepting failure. His team spread out around the workshop with practiced efficiency, not threatening but not casual either. They moved like professionals who knew exactly what they were looking for. "This is private property," Eleanor said, stepping between Hargrove and the door to her back room. "You don't have a warrant." Hargrove reached into his jacket and produced a folded document. "National Security Authorization under Executive Order 13,948. We're investigating threats to high-ranking military personnel." Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. He glanced meaningfully at the collection of rifle parts organized with surgical precision on her workbench. "That's quite a workshop you've got here, Ms. Morgan. Custom rifling tools, match-grade barrel reamers, scope alignment equipment that costs more than most people's cars." Eleanor's jaw tightened. She'd covered every angle, or so she thought. Her equipment was all legally obtained, technically, though some pieces had been modified in ways that would raise eyebrows among civilian law enforcement. "I restore antique firearms," she said. "Collector's items, hunting rifles, nothing military grade." One of Hargrove's men approached with a handheld device, sweeping it across her workbench. It beeped softly as it passed over certain tools. And the man looked back at Hargrove and nodded. Hargrove's smile never wavered. "The thing about precision tools, Ms. Morgan, is they leave microscopic signatures on everything they touch. Barrel rifling patterns, firing pin impressions, scope alignment markers, like fingerprints to those who know how to read them." He took a step closer. "Your fingerprints match those found on a very specific kind of ammunition recovered from a very specific kind of shooting incident. Incidents spanning 40 years across 3 continents. Eleanor felt the familiar weight of being hunted, the same feeling that had driven her to disappear 7 years ago. But this time was different. This time she had something to protect, not just her identity but the life she'd built in this quiet town. "You're fishing," she said. "Am I?" Hargrove pulled out a tablet, swiping to a series of photographs. Ballistic reports, impact analyses, trajectory reconstructions from shooting sites across decades. The last image showed a bullet casing recovered from a mountainside in Afghanistan 3 weeks ago. He looked up at her. A single shot from 1,780 meters through high mountain winds, with a temperature differential of 30 degrees between shooter position and target. The bullet passed through a 2-inch gap in bulletproof glass before finding its mark. Only 5 snipers in world history could make that shot. The photos showed familiar terrain and ballistic patterns. Eleanor recognized the work immediately. It was a signature shot that would have required compensation for wind, gravity, and the Coriolis effect. "Could be anyone," she said. Hargrove's expression hardened slightly. 4 of those snipers are confirmed dead. The 5th disappeared 15 years ago after a classified operation in Sarajevo went sideways. An operation codenamed Moonshot. The silence stretched between them like a wire under tension. Eleanor could feel his team analyzing her every micro-expression, looking for the crack that would confirm their suspicions. "Never heard of it," she said finally. "Officially, you're right." Hargrove put the tablet away. "But we both know the truth, don't we, Master Sergeant Eleanor Artemis Blackwood?" The name, her real name, landed like a punch to the gut. Eleanor Blackwood had died in a surveillance post 15 years ago, erased from every database, every record, every official memory. Eleanor Morgan had been born in her place, quiet and unremarkable. But now the past had found her anyway. Hargrove stepped closer, lowering his voice. "We're not here to arrest you. We're here because there's a situation developing, and frankly, you're the only sniper alive with the skills to handle it." "I don't shoot anymore," Eleanor said, holding up her trembling hands. "As you can see, I'm not exactly steady these days. A team of diplomats and military advisors is trapped in a hostile embassy situation. The extraction plan requires elimination of 6 guards simultaneously before they can trigger explosives. The perimeter is secured by motion sensors accurate to 1 millimeter. The team includes General William Hayes." Eleanor turned away, staring at the storm clouds building on the horizon. "Send someone else. We tried. 3 snipers failed the simulation. Too difficult, they said. Impossible shot angles, no stable firing positions, and the guards change positions every 90 seconds. Hargrove's voice dropped to almost a whisper. "Hayes specifically requested you if anything ever went wrong. Saad Artemis was the only shooter crazy enough to take the impossible shot and skilled enough to make it." Eleanor closed her eyes, feeling the weight of old promises and old loyalties that she'd tried so hard to bury. Behind her, in the hidden bunker, her rifle set silent but ready, maintained and calibrated from her weekly practice routine. "How did you find me?" she asked. Hargrove smiled grimly. "Hayes never forgot about you. He's been protecting your new identity for years, keeping you off the radar. When we needed a miracle shooter, he gave us coordinates and a name, Eleanor Morgan, gunsmith in Whispering Pines, Montana. Said to look for the woman with the trembling hands who still made the cleanest shot he'd ever seen." The team began packing up their equipment, but Hargrove remained, watching her face in the fading light. "We'll be at the airfield in 1 hour," he said. "Your choice. But if you don't come, good people die, including the man who's kept your secrets all these years." As the SUVs disappeared down the gravel road, Eleanor stood alone in the gathering dusk. The storm was moving closer now, lightning flickering on the horizon like muzzle flashes. Inside the workshop, her rifle cases waited, and the hidden equipment room hummed softly with dehumidifiers protecting precision optics. For 7 years, Eleanor Morgan had been invisible, but Artemis was about to wake up. Eleanor stood in her workshop for 20 minutes after Hargrove's team left, staring at the hidden panel that concealed her past. The radio on her workbench crackled with weather updates, storm system intensifying, winds gusting to 35 knots, visibility dropping fast. Suicide conditions for any normal sniper, but Eleanor Blackwood had never been normal. She walked to the locked cabinet in the corner, her hands moving with muscle memory to the hidden biometric scanner disguised as a power outlet. Inside was everything Hargrove's men hadn't found: classified ballistic charts, custom ammunition she'd hand-loaded herself, and a photo she hadn't looked at in years. The picture showed 4 snipers standing beside their ghillie suits, faces smeared with camouflage paint and exhaustion. They looked like ghosts emerging from the forest floor. In the center, barely 50 and wearing Master Sergeant stripes, was Eleanor herself. Next to her stood a younger William Hayes, then just a captain with a promising career ahead of him. She'd saved his life in that operation, taking a shot that the mission parameters had deemed statistically impossible. When the extraction had gone wrong, Hayes had carried her 3 miles to the evacuation point with a bullet in his shoulder and enemy forces in pursuit. The encrypted satellite phone hidden behind the photo buzzed once, a message on the emergency. Frequency only 2 people in the world knew. Eleanor's fingers trembled slightly as she powered it up. The message was simple. Artemis, need overwatch. Grid coordinates follow. Timer critical. Hayes, he was alive then. But clearly in the kind of trouble that couldn't be solved through official channels, or he wouldn't have activated their old emergency protocol. Eleanor grabbed her go bag, already packed with essentials that hadn't changed in 15 years. A habit from a lifetime of being ready to disappear at a moment's notice. She pressed a hidden button under her workbench, and the heavy table slid silently aside, revealing the stairway down to her bunker. Each movement was deliberate and practiced as she selected her equipment. Not the military-issue sniper rifles. Those were traceable. Instead, she chose the weapon she'd built herself, pieced together from components that couldn't be tracked, with a custom trigger assembly designed specifically for her trembling hands. The rifle was unlike anything in any military arsenal, lighter, more accurate, with a proprietary recoil system that compensated for her physical limitations. The scope included stabilization technology she'd adapted from medical equipment designed for surgeons with hand tremors. As she assembled the rifle, Eleanor caught her reflection in the polished gun case. The woman looking back wasn't Eleanor Morgan anymore. She was Artemis, and Artemis never missed. The storm was intensifying as she loaded her equipment into the hidden compartment of her truck. Rain lashed against the windows, lightning illuminating the mountain road in stark flashes as she drove toward the private airfield Hargrove had mentioned. The coordinates Hayes had sent led to a compound on the Turkish-Syrian border, an area officially designated as a diplomatic zone. Unofficially, it was a powder keg of competing intelligence operations, where agents from a dozen countries played. A deadly game of cat and mouse. If Hayes was trapped there, he wasn't on any sanctioned mission. Eleanor switched on the encrypted radio she kept hidden under her truck's dashboard, tuning to a frequency that shouldn't still exist. Overwatch Actual, this is Artemis, responding to Emergency Protocol 7 Alpha 9. Static then. Jesus Christ, is that really you? Hayes' voice, older and rougher than she remembered, but unmistakably him. Overwatch, confirm situation. Parameters. Artemis, we are in deep. Embassy compound breached. Hostiles have control of the main building. 6 tangos with dead man switches. If any one of them releases pressure on their trigger, the whole place goes up. 14 hostages including 3 high-value targets. Conventional assault deemed too risky. Eleanor checked her watch, calculating flight times and approach vectors. Overwatch, what's your time frame? Guard rotation in 6 hours. After that, they move the hostages and we lose our window. She pulled into the small airfield where a Gulfstream jet waited on the tarmac, engines already running. Hargrove stood at the bottom of the stairs, watching her approach through the rain. You came, he said, no surprise in his voice. Eleanor nodded once, her rifle case held close to her side. Not for you. The flight was 9 hours of tense silence. Eleanor used the time to review the intelligence briefings Hargrove provided, building schematics, guard patterns, weather data, and ballistic challenges. The situation was even worse than Hayes had indicated. The embassy compound sat in a valley surrounded by steep hills, with only one position that offered lines of sight to all 6 guard positions simultaneously. That position was an abandoned apartment building, 1,600 meters away, well beyond the effective range of standard military sniper rifles under ideal conditions. These conditions were far from ideal. Unpredictable mountain winds, temperature variations, and the need to shoot through windows at extreme angles made the shots virtually impossible by any conventional calculation. No wonder your other snipers backed out, Eleanor said, studying the terrain model. This is a suicide mission. Hargrove's expression remained neutral. That's why we need Artemis. Eleanor's hands trembled as she traced the lines of fire on the tactical map, but her voice was steady. I'll need atmospheric readings every 3 minutes, wind speed monitors at 500-meter intervals, and a spotter I trust. You can have whatever you need. I need haze on comms. No one else. As the jet began its descent, Eleanor prepared herself mentally for what was to come. The tremors in her hands seemed worse now, amplified by stress and the knowledge of what was at stake. Hargrove watched her with undisguised concern. Can you still make the shot? He asked finally, eyeing her unsteady hands. Eleanor met his gaze with the cold focus that had made her legendary. I never miss. The operation setup was textbook military efficiency. A forward base had been established in an abandoned building overlooking the embassy compound. Satellite feeds showed thermal images of the hostages clustered in the main hall, with 6 guards positioned strategically around them. Each guard wore a suicide vest with a dead man switch, pressure-sensitive triggers that would detonate if released. The only way to prevent mass casualties was to neutralize all 6 guards simultaneously before any of them could release their triggers. An impossible task for a conventional sniper team. But Artemis had never been conventional. Eleanor set up her position on the top floor of the abandoned apartment building, meticulously arranging her equipment with the precision that defined her, despite her trembling hands. Her custom rifle was assembled piece by piece, each component checked and rechecked. Artemis, this is Overwatch. Radio check. Hayes' voice came through her earpiece, calm and professional. Overwatch, Artemis reads you 5 by 5. Eleanor adjusted her scope, her trembling fingers somehow steadying when they touched the familiar controls. It's good to hear your voice, old friend, Hayes said, the formality briefly dropping. Save it for when we're done, Eleanor replied, but there was warmth beneath the professional tone. Give me a sitrep. 6 tangos, positions as briefed. Hostages in the main hall. Tangos are rotating positions every 90 minutes. Next rotation in 43 minutes. After that, they move the hostages to vehicles waiting at the east entrance. Eleanor studied the thermal images, noting the patterns of movement, the way each guard shifted position, the rhythm of their patrol. I see them, marking targets Alpha through Foxtrot. Artemis, be advised, local forces are preparing their own assault. Timeline has accelerated. We now have 30 minutes before they move in. Eleanor's expression hardened. That's not enough. Time for proper calibration. It's all we've got. She took a deep breath, feeling the familiar calm of combat settling over her. Age and tremors might have changed her body, but they hadn't touched the core of who she was, the world's deadliest sniper, the woman who made impossible shots when everything was on the line. Overwatch confirm. You need all 6 tangos neutralized simultaneously to prevent detonation? Confirmed, Artemis. Any delay between shots risks catastrophic response. Eleanor looked down at her hands, watching them tremble against the stock of her rifle. For anyone else, this would be an admission of defeat. For her, it was simply another variable to calculate. I'll need wind readings from all monitoring stations. And Overwatch, I need you on Overwatch, no one else. Already in position. Artemis, just like old times. Eleanor began her preparations, falling into the ritual that had defined her military career. First, she calculated the baseline ballistics, distance, elevation, temperature differential. Then she factored in the complications, shooting through glass at extreme angles, wind variations at different elevations, the Coriolis effect at this latitude. Finally, she addressed the most challenging variable, her own trembling hands. Where once she had been able to hold a rifle motionless for hours, now her hands betrayed her with constant rhythmic tremors. But what the young officers who had failed this mission didn't understand was that consistency could be compensated for. Eleanor had spent years studying her own tremors, mapping their patterns, understanding their rhythms. She had rebuilt her entire shooting technique around them, turning what others saw as weakness into a strange kind of strength. Overwatch. Beginning calibration sequence. For the next 20 minutes, Eleanor fired precisely calculated tests. Shots at empty buildings surrounding the compound, using subsonic ammunition that made no more sound than a cough. After each shot, she made minute adjustments to her scope and firing calculations. "Targets acquired," she finally said, her voice showing no trace of the tension evident in her trembling hands. "Standing by for synchronization." Hayes' voice came through clear and steady. "Artemis, be advised, we have movement. Hostages are being prepared for transport earlier than expected. Timeline has accelerated. We now have less than 10 minutes. Eleanor felt the pressure building but pushed it aside. Pressure was just another variable to calculate and compensate for. "Overwatch, I need a countdown. All 6 targets must be in optimal position simultaneously." For 7 tense minutes, they waited as the guards moved through their patrol patterns. Eleanor tracked each one through her scope, compensating for her tremors with subtle adjustments in her breathing and trigger control. "Targets approaching." "Alignment," Hayes reported. "Potential window in 30 seconds." Eleanor took a controlled breath, feeling her heart rate slow as she entered the near-meditative state that had made her legendary. The tremors in her hands seemed to synchronize with her heartbeat, becoming predictable, usable. 20 seconds. She made final adjustments to her aim point, calculating the exact moment when all 6 targets would be optimally positioned, factoring in the time it would take for her to transition between shots. 10 seconds. Eleanor's finger rested lightly on the trigger, her breathing shallow and controlled. Targets aligned. Execute, execute, execute. What happened next would later be described by military analysts as ballistically impossible. In a span of 3-8 seconds, Eleanor fired 6 shots at 6 separate targets located at different elevations, through different window angles, at a distance of over 1,600 meters. Each shot found its mark with millimeter precision, clean headshots that ensured the guards' hands remained clenched on their deadman switches even as they fell. The specialized ammunition she had hand-loaded caused minimal exit trauma, preventing accidental trigger release. 6 shots, 6 kills. Simultaneous enough that none had time to react to the first before the last was complete. "Tango's down," Hayes confirmed, disbelief evident even in his professional tone. "All switches secure. Assault team moving in." Eleanor remained motionless, her rifle still trained on the compound, providing overwatch as Special Forces operators swarmed the building, securing the dead man switches with mechanical clamps. Before evacuating the hostages, "Artemis package secured. General Hayes is safe. All hostages accounted for." Only then did Eleanor lower her rifle, her hands now shaking violently from the combination of adrenaline and age. She began methodically disassembling her equipment, each piece returned to its proper place despite her unsteady fingers. Hargrove's voice came through her earpiece. "Miss Blackwood, that was—" There's no word for what that was. Eleanor didn't respond, focused on erasing all evidence of her presence from the sniper hide. "The extraction team is 15 minutes out," Hargrove continued. "They'll bring you to the secure facility for debriefing." "No," Eleanor said simply. "That wasn't the deal." "Miss Blackwood, standard protocol requires—" "My name is Eleanor Morgan," she interrupted. "I'm a gunsmith from Montana. And I'm going home." There was a long pause before Hayes' voice replaced Hargrove's. "Extraction team will transport you to the airport. A private jet is standing by to take you home. Your truck will be waiting at the airfield." "Thank you, William," Eleanor said. Quietly, "No, Artemis, thank you." As she finished packing her equipment, Eleanor looked out at the embassy compound in the distance. Special Forces operators were loading the hostages onto helicopters, their faces hidden behind tactical gear. Among them, she could just make out the distinctive posture of General William Hayes, the man she'd saved twice now across 15 years. Some debts could never be repaid, and some bonds never broken. Eleanor Morgan might return to her quiet life in Whispering Pines, but Artemis would always be part of who she was, trembling hands and all. The military transport plane touched down on American soil at 3:27 a.m., its engines cutting to silence as Eleanor Morgan sat motionless in her seat, the custom rifle case secured at her feet. The tremor in her hands had worsened during the flight, the aftermath of adrenaline and precision focus taking its toll on her aging body. Beyond the small window, she could see the lights of a waiting SUV Hargrove's people, no doubt unwilling to simply let Artemis disappear again. "Ms. Morgan?" A young lieutenant approached, respectful but cautious. "General Hargrove would like to speak with you before you depart." Eleanor studied the young officer, noting the intelligence in her eyes and the way she held herself. Not intimidated despite clearly knowing who she was addressing. "I'm done speaking," Eleanor replied, rising to her feet with the deliberate care of someone who refused to acknowledge physical limitations. "Ma'am," he was very insistent. "It concerns General Hayes." That stopped her. Eleanor's pale blue eyes narrowed slightly, the only indication of her concern. "What about Hayes?" "I'm not authorized to say, ma'am. General Hargrove is waiting in the command building." Eleanor shouldered her duffel bag, keeping the rifle case close. "Lead the way, Lieutenant." They walked across the tarmac, the pre-dawn, air sharp with approaching winter. This wasn't a standard military base, Eleanor noted. No identifying markers, minimal personnel, and security measures that suggested operations beyond conventional military purview. A black site, then, the kind of place where problematic assets were debriefed and sometimes disappeared. "General." Hargrove waited in a Spartan conference room, the wall behind him covered with tactical maps of regions Eleanor recognized all too well. He stood when she entered, dismissing the lieutenant with a nod. "Artemis." "That's not my name," Eleanor interrupted, setting her rifle case on the table between them. "Not anymore." Hargrove studied her with clinical detachment. "Remarkable work in Turkey. 6 impossible shots with hands that should make precision shooting physically impossible. The medical team would like to understand how." "I'm sure they would." Eleanor remained standing, her posture a challenge. "Where's Hayes?" "Debriefing. The situation was more complicated than we initially briefed you." Hargrove activated a screen on the wall, displaying surveillance photos of the embassy compound. The hostage situation was engineered specifically to draw out certain high-value personnel. It was a targeted extraction, not a random terrorist incident. Eleanor's expression hardened. "You used me. We needed those shots made. You were the only one who could make them." Hargrove's tone was unapologetic. "But there's something else you should know. The operation was compromised from within." He swiped to another image, thermal surveillance, showing a figure moving through the embassy compound during the extraction. This individual accessed secure communications during the operation and transmitted classified tactical data to an unknown receiver. Eleanor studied the image, her tactical mind automatically analyzing movement patterns and physical characteristics, despite the low-resolution thermal imagery. "One of yours. That is what we need to determine." Hargrove leaned forward. The data they accessed included personnel files on a classified program called Longshot. The name sent a cold shock through Eleanor's system, though her expression remained neutral. Longshot had been the Black Ops sniper program she had helped develop before her official death, a program that had identified and trained the most exceptional marksmen in military history, including a young William Hayes. Longshot was decommissioned 15 years ago, she said carefully. "Officially, yes." Unofficially, the program continued under different management. New protocols, new personnel, same objective: creating precision shooters, capable of making the impossible shot. Hargrove's expression darkened. Someone is systematically eliminating long-shot graduates. 3 have died in the past month. Precision kills at extreme ranges using techniques only taught in the program. Eleanor's mind raced through implications. And Hayes is the next target, we believe. The embassy situation may have been designed to expose his location and force him into the open. Hargrove slid a folder across the table. These are the incident reports. The pattern is unmistakable. Someone is hunting long-shot snipers using their own techniques against them. Eleanor opened the folder, her trembling fingers moving methodically through the reports. 3 shooters dead, each killed with a single shot from distances exceeding 1,500 meters. No ballistic evidence recovered, no witnesses. Who is running long shot now? She asked, her voice deceptively calm. Colonel Marcus Reed. He was your replacement after your departure. Eleanor stiffened slightly. Reed had been her second in command. A brilliant shooter, but overly ambitious with theories about sniper warfare that she had found ethically questionable. Reed would not eliminate his own assets. Perhaps not voluntarily. Hargrove brought up another file. Reed disappeared 3 weeks ago while on leave. His cabin in Colorado was found empty, signs of struggle, blood evidence matching his type. We believe whoever is targeting long-shot graduates took Reed first, possibly to extract operational information. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. They are using Reed's knowledge to hunt down his snipers. Precisely. And now they know Hayes is alive. Hargrove's expression was grim. We need to get to him before they do. Eleanor closed the folder, her decision already made. Where is he now? Being transported to a secure facility in Montana. Remote location, minimal personnel to reduce infiltration risk. Hargrove paused. Approximately 30 miles from Whispering Pines. Of course it was. Nothing in Eleanor's life had ever been coincidental. You want me to protect him? Not a question. I want you to catch whoever is hunting long-shot. Hayes is the bait. Hargrove met her gaze directly. You are the only sniper alive with the skills to counter someone trained by Reed. Except Reed himself, Eleanor pointed out, if he is still alive. Eleanor considered her options, though she knew she had already decided the moment Hayes was mentioned. She owed him too much to walk away, even if it meant stepping back into a world she had left behind. I will need complete operational autonomy. My equipment, my protocols, no interference. Hargrove nodded. Granted. And when this is over, I disappear. Again, permanently. New identity, new location, all records of Eleanor Morgan and Artemis erased. That can be arranged. Eleanor picked up her rifle case. Then let us go hunting. The Montana Safe House was a former ranger station nestled in a valley, surrounded by forested ridges, defensible, but with too many potential sniper positions for Eleanor's comfort. The facility had been retrofitted with modern security systems, but to her tactical eye, it remained vulnerable to the kind of long-range precision attack that had killed 3 long-shot graduates already. Eleanor arrived shortly before sunset, her truck following the unmarked SUV that had escorted her from the private airfield. As she stepped out into the chill mountain air, she immediately began cataloging sight lines, calculating distances to ridge positions, identifying vulnerabilities. A security team waited at the main entrance, led by a compact, serious-faced woman who introduced herself simply as Director Collins. Ms. Morgan Collins greeted her with professional respect. General Hayes is expecting you. Eleanor nodded her eyes, still scanning the surrounding terrain. Your security perimeter is insufficient. You have at least 7 unmonitored approach vectors from the northern ridgeline. Collins's expression remained neutral. We have established sniper detection systems, covering all approaches beyond 800 meters. The shots that killed your long-shot graduates were all taken from beyond 1,500 meters, Eleanor countered. Whoever is hunting them will not approach within your detection range. Something flickered in Collins's eyes, concern perhaps, or recognition that she was dealing with someone who understood the threat better than she did. We will adjust our perimeter. Do it now. Eleanor shouldered her bag. And I want topographical maps of the entire region, weather reports for the next 72 hours, and a direct line to your security stations. Inside the facility hummed with quiet efficiency communications equipment, security monitors, and a small but well-equipped tactical team. In the central operations room, standing over a digital terrain map, was William Hayes. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment the years seemed to fall away. Despite the silver threading his dark hair and the new lines etched around his eyes, he was still the sharp-eyed captain she had mentored decades ago. Eleanor. He stepped forward, his handshake firm, his eyes warm with genuine respect. Thank you for coming. You knew I would, she replied simply. Hayes nodded, understanding the weight of their shared history. I have been briefed on the situation. 3 of our people dead, Reed missing. And you are next on the list. Eleanor set her rifle case on the table, the familiar weight a comfort in this uncertain scenario. Unless we catch them first. Hayes gestured to the terrain map. Collins has established security protocols based on standard sniper countermeasures, but standard will not be enough, Eleanor finished. Whoever is doing this was trained by Reed, which means they know exactly how to circumvent standard protocols. She studied the digital topography, her trained eye identifying potential firing positions, calculating distances and angles. The tremor in her hand seemed more pronounced under Hayes' watchful gaze, but she ignored it, focusing on the tactical problem before her. There she said, pointing to a ridge approximately 1,700 meters northwest of the facility. That is where I would set up if I were targeting this building. Clear line of sight to the main structure, protected position, with multiple egress routes, elevation advantage. Hayes examined the position. That is beyond effective range for most shooters, not for a long-shot graduate. Eleanor met his gaze, and not for whoever is hunting them. She began issuing orders with the natural authority of someone accustomed to command despite having left the military 15 years earlier. The security team responded instinctively to her expertise, adjusting their perimeter, establishing new monitoring protocols, preparing contingencies. As night fell, Eleanor claimed a small room overlooking the northern approach, converting it into an impromptu sniper nest. She unpacked her custom rifle with methodical precision, assembling it piece by piece despite her trembling hands. Hayes watched from the doorway, his expression thoughtful. The tremors, he said finally. How long? Eleanor continued her work without looking up. Started about 8 years ago. Progressive neurological condition, the doctors say. Likely from exposure to certain chemical agents during our operations in Kazakhstan. Yet you made those shots in Turkey. 6 kills, 1,600 meters through glass with hands that shake like that. Hayes shook his head in quiet amazement. How? Eleanor finished mounting the scope before responding. The tremors are consistent, rhythmic. I learned to time my shots to the pattern, firing in the microsecond between tremors. That is necessary, she interrupted. I adapted because I had to. Hayes nodded, understanding the steel-willed determination that had always defined her. Just like you taught us. Obstacles are variables to be calculated, not excuses to fail. A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. You were paying attention. Best teacher I ever had. Hayes moved into the room, studying the security feed she had established. Do you think it is Reed? Could he have broken under interrogation started hunting his own people? Eleanor considered the possibility. Reed was always ideological, believed in the purity of the perfect shot, but he was loyal to the program. She shook her head slightly. If he is involved, it is not willingly. Then who? We will know when they make their move. Eleanor positioned her rifle, sighting through the scope to the distant ridgeline she'd identified earlier. and they will make their move. You're too valuable a target to pass up." Hayes was quiet for a moment. "I'm sorry we pulled you back." Into this, Eleanor adjusted her scope, compensating for the tremor in her hands with practiced precision. "We both know I never really left." For 3 days they waited. Eleanor established a rotation with the security team, covering all potential approach vectors, while Hayes continued his official duties under the guise of a routine inspection tour. The facility maintained its cover as a communications outpost, with nothing to indicate the presence of one of the military's highest-ranking officers. On the morning of the 4th day, Eleanor detected the first sign of surveillance, a brief reflection from the northern ridge, gone so quickly it might have been dismissed as imagination by a less experienced observer. "We have company," she reported through the secure channel. "Northern ridge, position Alpha 3. Single observer, likely conducting preliminary surveillance." Hayes joined her at the observation post, studying the ridge through high-powered binoculars. "I don't see anything. They're gone now." "But they were there." Eleanor's voice held absolute certainty. "They'll come back tonight." Darkness, cloud cover moving in, ideal conditions for a long-range shot. Hayes nodded, trusting her assessment. Implicitly, "How do you want to play this?" "We set the trap." Eleanor outlined her plan, a calculated risk that would draw out the shooter while minimizing Hayes' actual exposure. "They want a clear shot at you. We'll give them what looks like one." As dusk approached, storm clouds gathered over the mountains, bringing the promise of snow and reduced visibility. Challenging conditions for most snipers, but potentially advantageous for someone with long-shot training, who would know how to use the weather as concealment. Eleanor positioned herself in her chosen counter-sniper hide, a location that offered coverage of the northern approaches while remaining concealed from observation. Her rifle was prepared, her calculations made, compensating for wind, temperature, and her own physical limitations. "Security team reports all positions covered." Hayes' voice came through her earpiece. "Thermal imaging is degraded due to the storm front, but motion sensors are active." "They won't help," Eleanor replied. "A long-shot sniper can approach without triggering standard motion detection. Tell your team to watch for anomalies in the natural environment, wildlife movement patterns, unexpected stillness." As darkness fell completely, Eleanor settled into the patient, meditative state that had defined her career as a sniper. Hours could pass without movement, without distraction, her focus absolute despite the discomfort of her aging body and the persistent tremor in her hands. The storm intensified, snow beginning to fall in thick, swirling flakes that reduced visibility and complicated targeting calculations. Most security teams would consider such conditions a natural deterrent to sniper activity. Eleanor knew better. At precisely 2:17 a.m., she detected the first concrete sign of the hunter's presence, a momentary disruption in the natural snow pattern falling across the northern ridge, indicating a hidden position that forced the snowflakes to alter their descent. "Contact," she whispered into her com. "Northern ridge, position previously identified. Prepare to execute." Inside the facility, Hayes moved according to their plan, creating the appearance of a security check through a section of the building with windows facing the northern approach. A ballistic mannequin with his heat signature was positioned to create a convincing target. Eleanor tracked the nearly invisible disturbance in the snowfall, calculating the position of a shooter she couldn't actually see. The tremor in her hands seemed to intensify with the adrenaline of the moment, but she breathed through it, finding the rhythm within the tremors. The shot, when it came, was virtually silent, a whisper in the storm that would have gone unnoticed if Eleanor hadn't been waiting for exactly that sound. The ballistic mannequin in the window jerked as a round passed cleanly through where Hayes' head would have been. In the millisecond after the shot, before the shooter could confirm their kill or prepare to relocate, Eleanor had her window. Despite trembling hands, despite the storm, Despite the near impossible visibility, she fired once, 1,734 meters through driving snow at a target she could barely perceive. With hands that shook so badly, most people mocked her when she picked up a coffee cup. The shot flew true, striking not to kill but to wound, catching the distant shooter in the shoulder with calculated precision, enough to incapacitate, but not enough to be fatal. "Target down," she reported calmly. "Extraction team move now." The security team, already positioned for this eventuality, converged on the northern ridge with practiced efficiency. Within 17 minutes, they had secured the wounded shooter and were transporting them back to the facility. Eleanor remained at her post, rifle trained on the approach vector, ensuring there were no additional threats. Only when the extraction team confirmed they had secured the area did she finally lower her weapon, the tremor in her hands now violent with the aftermath of such intense focus. Hayes joined her as she packed up her equipment, his expression a mixture of awe and concern. "You made that shot through a snowstorm, in near-zero visibility, with—" he gestured to her shaking hands. Eleanor secured her rifle, her movements precise despite the tremors. "Let's see who's been hunting your people." In the facility's secure medical bay, the captured shooter lay sedated but stable, the shoulder wound precisely where Eleanor had intended, through soft tissue, avoiding major arteries and bone. "No identification," Collins reported as Eleanor and Hayes entered. "Female, approximately 30 years old. Expert fieldcraft, specialized equipment, custom ammunition consistent with long-shot protocols." Eleanor approached the unconscious figure, studying her face with growing concern. "Wake her." The medical officer looked to Hayes, who nodded authorization. A stimulant was administered, and within moments, the shooter's eyes opened, alert. Despite the medication, assessing her surroundings with the trained awareness of a special operations professional. When her gaze fell on Eleanor, something shifted in her expression, not surprise, but recognition. "Artemis," she said, her voice steady despite her injury. "The legend herself." Eleanor stood perfectly still, only her hands betraying emotion. In their increased trembling, "Who are you?" "Student of the program, one of the last." The woman's eyes moved to Hayes. "General Hayes, I expected better security protocols." "Who sent you?" Hayes demanded. The woman smiled slightly. "The program sent me, just as it sent you once." Longshot never ended, it evolved. Eleanor leaned closer. "Where is Reed?" Colonel Reed served his purpose. The woman's expression remained unnervingly calm, as did all the others. "Outdated assets, teaching outdated methods." "You killed them," Hayes realized. "Your own instructors." "Graduated beyond them," she corrected. The program needed to advance. Old methodologies were limiting progress. Eleanor's mind raced through implications. What program? Longshot was shut down. Officially, the woman studied Eleanor with unsettling intensity. Unofficially, it became something more. Project Nemesis, the next evolution in precision warfare. No more lone snipers making single shots. Now we work in networks, coordinated precision, multiple angles of approach. Eleanor's blood ran cold. "You're not alone." The woman's smile widened fractionally. "I never am." Hayes immediately activated his comm. "All security teams full. Lockdown. We have multiple threats, repeat, multiple." The facility's lights cut out before he could finish, emergency generators failing to engage. In the sudden darkness, Eleanor's instincts took over. She grabbed Hayes, pulling him down as the window behind them shattered. A shot from a completely different vector than they'd been monitoring. "Second shooter," she hissed, dragging Hayes toward cover as more shots penetrated the building. With surgical precision. They were waiting for us to focus on the first. The facility erupted into coordinated chaos. Multiple breach points, communications jammed, security systems compromised. This wasn't a single assassin, but a coordinated, tactical team using long-shot techniques amplified by networked precision. In the medical bay, the captured shooter was already moving despite her wound, leveraging the confusion to attempt escape. Eleanor made a split-second decision, focusing on the immediate threat to Hayes rather than the fleeing prisoner. "We need to get you out," she told Hayes, her voice calm despite the crisis unfolding around them. "They've compromised the entire facility." Hayes nodded grimly, his military training asserting itself as he assessed options. East exit, through the service tunnel. "It's not on the main schematics." Eleanor led the way, her sidearm drawn, moving with the fluid efficiency that decades of training had burned into muscle memory. Around them, the sounds of precision gunfire and tactical breaching charges indicated a well-coordinated assault. "This isn't just about eliminating long-shot graduates," Hayes said as they navigated the darkened corridors. "This is a coup. Someone taking over the program, eliminating anyone who knows its origins. Which means they'll never stop hunting you." Eleanor replied, "You designed half the protocols they're using right now." They reached the concealed service tunnel, a narrow passage that led to an emergency exit half a kilometer from the main facility. As Hayes worked the hidden mechanism to open the reinforced door, Eleanor covered their rear, her trembling hands somehow steady enough when wrapped around her pistol grip. "Eleanor," Hayes said quietly as the door finally opened. "If we don't make it out, save it," she interrupted. "We're not dying here." The tunnel beyond was dark and cold, designed for maintenance access rather than comfortable passage. They moved quickly, guided by the tactical light on Eleanor's sidearm, the sounds of conflict growing more distant behind them. "How many do you think?" Hayes asked as they approached the exit point. Eleanor calculated based on the pattern of breaches she'd observed. At least 6, maybe 8. Working as coordinated pairs, using long-shot techniques, but with networked tactical integration. "The next evolution," Hayes murmured. "What Reed always wanted, snipers operating like a hive mind instead of lone wolves." The exit hatch at the end of the tunnel led to a small equipment shed approximately half a kilometer from the main facility. Eleanor checked the security feed on her tactical device. All cameras showed static. Communications remained jammed. "They'll have this exit covered," she said. "Standard containment protocol." Hayes nodded grimly. "So we do something non-standard." Despite the gravity of their situation, Eleanor felt a familiar surge of determination. This was the Hayes she remembered, adaptive, resourceful, refusing to accept defeat even when outmaneuvered. "I have an idea," she said, her trembling hands already reaching for her bag. "But you're not going to like it." Eleanor's non-standard approach was precisely the kind of tactical improvisation that had made her legendary during her active service years. As Hayes watched her work, he was reminded why Artemis had been the measuring stick against which all other snipers were judged. "They're expecting us to emerge cautiously, probably using thermal imaging to track our approach too." "The exit," Eleanor explained as she removed items from her go bag. "So we give them heat signatures to track, just not ours." From her equipment, she produced 2 small devices, thermal decoys, military prototypes she'd modified for her own purposes. Each was no larger than a smartphone but could produce a human-equivalent heat signature for approximately 20 minutes. "These will move in a preset pattern toward the exit, triggering any waiting snipers," she continued, programming the devices with quick, efficient movements despite her trembling hands. "When they fire, they reveal their positions." Hayes nodded in understanding. "And while they're focused on the decoys, we take an unexpected route." Eleanor pointed upward, toward a maintenance hatch in the ceiling that led to a narrow crawl space between the tunnel and the ground above. Service access for the electrical conduits. "It'll be tight, but it comes out 50 meters east of the equipment shed, behind that stand of pines, giving us cover to disappear into the forest," Hayes finished, impressed despite the dire circumstances. "Where did you learn about that access point? It's not in any of the schematics." Eleanor's expression remained focused on her work. "I spent 3 days studying every aspect of this facility's construction before I arrived. I don't leave survival to chance. The plan was precisely timed." Eleanor activated the thermal decoys, sending them on a predetermined path toward the exit while she and Hayes ascended into the cramped maintenance space above. The passage was barely wide enough for an adult body, designed for cable access rather than human transit, but they moved with determined efficiency through the claustrophobic space. They emerged into the frigid night air just as shots rang out. Near the equipment shed, the enemy snipers engaging the decoys exactly as Eleanor had predicted. Using the distraction and the cover of continuing snowfall, they slipped into the dense pine forest surrounding the facility. "My truck is parked at the supply checkpoint, 2 kilometers south," Eleanor whispered as they moved through the trees with practiced stealth. "If they haven't found it yet, we have transportation." Hayes followed her lead, his own training evident in his silent movement despite the challenging terrain. "And if they have, then we improvise again." Eleanor's voice held the steady confidence that had once inspired an entire generation of military snipers. Giving up isn't an option. They moved through the forest like ghosts, using the storm as concealment, avoiding obvious paths that might be monitored. Eleanor set their course with unerring precision despite the near-zero visibility, navigating by memory and tactical instinct rather than technology that could be tracked. "How are you doing this?" Hayes asked during a brief pause as Eleanor checked their surroundings. "Navigating without GPS in a whiteout in unfamiliar terrain?" Eleanor's eyes, sharp despite her years, scanned the tree line. "I memorized the topographical maps before we left. 62 landmarks, elevation changes, vegetation patterns. The forest speaks if you know how to listen." Hayes shook his head slightly in amazement. "They said you were the best for a reason." "Age and shaky hands don't change what's up here." She tapped her temple, then continued moving. When they reached the supply checkpoint, Eleanor's caution proved warranted. Her truck remained where she'd left it, but 2 figures in tactical gear were positioned nearby, clearly watching for any approach. "Nemesis operatives," Hayes whispered, observing their positioning and equipment. "Professional setup. They've anticipated our escape routes." Eleanor studied the situation, her tactical mind calculating options. "They're good, but they're young." Making a classic error, too focused on the vehicle itself, not securing the entire perimeter. With hand signals that Hayes remembered from their shared past, Eleanor indicated her plan. They would circle wide, approach from the blind spot behind the storage shed, and neutralize the watchers simultaneously before they could alert the main force. Despite her age and her trembling hands, Eleanor moved with deadly efficiency. When they struck, it was with the coordinated precision that had defined long-shot operations, simultaneous takedowns. No shots fired, targets neutralized before they could respond. As Hayes secured the unconscious operatives, Eleanor checked her truck for tracking devices or sabotage, finding and disabling 3 separate transmitters hidden in the wheel wells and under the hood. "They're thorough," she noted, her breath forming clouds in the frigid air, "but predictable. Using standard long-shot protocols for vehicle surveillance." "Because that's how they were trained," Hayes replied, joining her at the truck. "Reed's methods just more networked." Eleanor nodded, her expression grim as she started the engine. "Which means they'll have contingencies for this contingency. We need to disappear before they realize the checkpoint team is offline." They drove south through the storm, avoiding main roads, taking logging paths and fire trails that didn't appear on standard maps. Eleanor drove with the confidence of someone intimately familiar with the terrain, despite the challenging conditions and her trembling hands on the steering wheel. "Where are we going?" Hayes asked after they'd put considerable distance between themselves and the compromised facility. "Somewhere they won't look," Eleanor replied, turning onto an almost invisible track through dense forest. Somewhere only Artemis would know. The somewhere turned out to be a hunting cabin nestled in a remote valley, accessible only by the unmarked trail they'd followed. The small structure appeared abandoned, weathered by years of Montana winters, but as Eleanor approached, she activated a hidden security system that brought the cabin to life: lights, heat, and surveillance perimeter. "One of your backup locations," Hayes realized as they entered the surprisingly well-equipped interior. "You've had this ready all along." Eleanor secured the door behind them, engaging locks that were far more sophisticated than the rustic exterior would suggest. "I maintain 7 such locations across 3 states. Old habits. Preparation isn't paranoia when people are actually hunting you," Hayes quoted, recognizing one of Eleanor's own maxims from her days training long-shot recruits. The cabin's interior belied its rough exterior: state-of-the-art communications, equipment, weapons cache, medical supplies, and enough provisions for weeks of self-sufficiency. Eleanor moved through the space with familiar ease, activating systems and checking security feeds. "We're off-grid here," she explained, setting up a communications array that wouldn't be detected by standard surveillance. Solar power with redundant battery systems, satellite uplink routed through multiple proxy servers. We can reach out without being traced. Hayes watched her work, noting how the tremor in her hand seemed to moderate when she was fully engaged in operational tasks. "You never really retired, did you?" Eleanor paused briefly. "I stepped away from the program." "I never stepped away from who I am." Once the cabin systems were online, Eleanor established a secure connection to a private server, accessing intelligence resources that should have been beyond civilian reach. Her fingers moved across the keyboard with practiced efficiency despite their persistent tremor. "Project Nemesis," she murmured, sorting through encrypted files. "It doesn't appear in any official records, but there are traces, budget allocations, personnel transfers, equipment requisitions that don't match stated purposes." Hayes leaned in, studying the data. "They've been building this for years. Right under our noses, using Longshot as cover." "Not just building it," Eleanor corrected, highlighting a series of operational reports. "Deploying it. 12 confirmed operations in the past 18 months, across 9 countries. Precision strikes attributed to unknown actors or local insurgents, all bearing the hallmarks of coordinated sniper teams." The implications were staggering. Longshot had been created as a defensive program, identifying and training exceptional snipers to protect American interests. Nemesis appeared to be something far more aggressive: networked assassination teams operating without oversight, beyond the boundaries of official sanction. "This goes higher than Reed," Hayes said grimly. "He couldn't have authorized these operations without approval from command level." Eleanor nodded, continuing to piece together the fragmented intelligence. "The question is whether command knows what they've actually authorized. Military bureaucracy has a way of obscuring true objectives behind acceptable language." As she worked, a notification appeared on her screen. An incoming communication on a frequency that should have been defunct for 15 years. The emergency channel from her long-shot days. "Someone's trying to reach us on the old network," she said, her expression cautious as she isolated the signal to prevent tracking. "It could be a trap." Hayes considered the risk. "Or it could be someone who knows what's happening. Someone with access to the original protocols." Eleanor activated the secure receiver, routing the communication through multiple scramblers to mask their location. "This is Oracle. Authenticate." The response came through as a series of coded tones, the authentication protocol that had been used by Longshot Command during Eleanor's tenure. It translated to a simple message: "Checkmate in 3. That's Reed's authentication, Hayes said, leaning closer to the receiver. But it could be coerced. Eleanor input the counter-response. Bishop takes knight. Verify position. A voice came through the speaker, distorted by encryption but recognizable to both of them. Colonel Marcus Reed, sounding exhausted but alert. Artemis, Hayes, thank God. I don't have much time before they trace this transmission. Where are you, Marcus? Eleanor asked, already working to pinpoint the signal's origin. Underground research facility, approximately 30 kilometers northeast of your last known position. Reed's voice was tight with urgency. I've been their guest for the past month. They're using me to refine the Nemesis protocols, but I've managed to access their communications array. Who's they? Hayes demanded. Who's running Nemesis? It's not what you think, Reed replied, his voice dropping lower. Nemesis isn't a military program. It's privatized. Defense contractor. Morrison Blackwell bought the research when Longshot was officially decommissioned. They've been developing it as a marketable asset, precision elimination teams for sale to the highest bidder. Eleanor and Hayes exchanged grim looks. Morrison Blackwell was one of the largest defense contractors in the world, with billions in government contracts and political connections at the highest levels. The shooters hunting Longshot graduates? Eleanor asked. Morrison Blackwell's cleanup operation, Reed confirmed. Eliminating anyone who knows enough about the original program to recognize what they've built. I'm only alive because they needed my expertise to train their teams. And now they're after Hayes, Eleanor concluded. Hayes is the priority target. As the most senior surviving Longshot commander, he could expose the entire operation. Reed's transmission began to break up with interference. They're on to me. Listen carefully. The facility is designated Olympus. Main access through abandoned mining complex. Heavy security, at least 20 Nemesis operators on site. They're preparing for deployment in. The transmission cut off abruptly, replaced by static. Eleanor immediately began correlating the limited information with geographical data, searching for abandoned mining operations in the specified region. There, she said finally, highlighting a location on the digital map. Old copper mine, supposedly decommissioned 15 years ago. But satellite imagery shows continued activity, vehicle traffic, power consumption, personnel movement. Hayes studied the location, his military mind already formulating tactical approaches. Frontal assault would be suicide. Even with a full special forces team, the defensive position is too strong. We don't need a frontal assault, Eleanor replied, her pale eyes focused with the intensity that had once made her the military's deadliest sniper. We need precision. She brought up detailed topographical renderings of the surrounding terrain, identifying elevation points, approach vectors, and potential insertion routes. Despite the advanced technology at her fingertips, Eleanor relied primarily on her tactical instinct, developed over decades of impossible missions. There's an approach through this ravine, she indicated, that provides cover to within 300 meters of the main entrance. Security will be focused outward, expecting a conventional assault or long-range sniper positioning. They'll have motion sensors, thermal imaging, probably seismic detection as well, Hayes pointed out. Standard long-shot counter-sniper protocols, enhanced with whatever advancements Nemesis has developed. Eleanor's expression remained resolute. Every system has blind spots, especially systems designed by people who learned from me. The plan that emerged over the next few hours was quintessential Artemis, meticulous, unorthodox, and with precisely calculated risks. They would approach not as snipers, but as ghosts, using techniques Eleanor had developed but never documented, exploiting weaknesses in protocols she herself had helped design. The tremors in your hands, Hayes said as Eleanor prepared her equipment. Will they be an issue for what you're planning? Eleanor checked her custom rifle, making minute adjustments to the trigger assembly. The tremors are part of the plan now. They create a unique firing signature that Nemesis won't be anticipating. By dawn, they were ready. Eleanor had assembled a remarkable kit from her cabin's resources: specialized infiltration equipment, communications gear impervious to, standard jamming techniques, and most importantly, her custom rifle, modified further for the specific challenges ahead. "You don't have to do this," Hayes said as they prepared to depart. "This isn't your fight anymore. You've given enough." Eleanor secured the final pieces of her equipment, her movements deliberate despite her trembling hands. "This was always my fight, William. I built Longshot to protect people, not to create assassins for corporate profit." She checked her watch, an old military timepiece that had accompanied her through decades of service. Besides, they made it personal when they mocked these hands. "I think it's time to show them what these trembling hands can still do." The approach to Olympus facility took 5 hours of grueling terrain navigation, through mountain wilderness still blanketed in fresh snow. Eleanor set a pace that would have challenged operators half her age, moving with the deliberate efficiency of someone who understood that survival depended on perfect execution rather than speed. By mid-afternoon, they had reached the observation point Eleanor had identified, a concealed position overlooking the mine entrance, sheltered by dense pine trees and a natural rock formation. 2 guard positions visible, Hayes noted through high-powered binoculars. Rotating patrols every 15 minutes. Vehicle checkpoint with armed personnel. Consistent with high-security military installation. Eleanor observed not just the obvious security measures, but the subtle details that revealed the true nature of the operation. The positioning of surveillance cameras, the patrol patterns that indicated specialized training, the way the guards carried themselves. "They're all Nemesis operators," she concluded, "not standard security personnel. Every one of them is a trained precision shooter." "Which means they'll recognize standard infiltration techniques," Hayes added. Eleanor nodded, her expression thoughtful. "So we used techniques that were never standard." As dusk approached, bringing the advantage of reduced visibility, Eleanor implemented the first phase of her plan. Rather than attempting to defeat the facility's advanced detection systems, she would use them against their operators, creating patterns of false positives that would gradually desensitize the security teams. Using specialized devices from her equipment cache, Eleanor deployed a series of micro-drones, each no larger than a sparrow, programmed to trigger the perimeter sensors in a carefully calculated pattern. "The first few alerts will bring full response," she explained as they watched the security teams react to the initial triggers. "By the 4th or 5th, they'll begin to suspect equipment malfunction. By the 10th, they'll start ignoring alerts from those sectors entirely." Hayes watched with growing appreciation as Eleanor's prediction played out with remarkable accuracy. The initial alerts brought armed response teams charging to the perimeter, but as the pattern continued over the next 2 hours, the responses became progressively less urgent. "Creating blind spots through behavioral conditioning," Hayes observed. "Brilliant." Eleanor checked her equipment one final time, her trembling hands moving with practiced precision over the custom rifle she'd modified specifically for this mission. "It's time. Remember your role. I get us in, you find Reed. I create the extraction window." Hayes nodded, checking his own weapon, a suppressed sidearm suitable for close-quarters combat, just like Sarajevo. A ghost of a smile crossed Eleanor's face. "Let's hope the extraction goes better this time." Under cover of darkness, they moved toward the facility, using the blind spots Eleanor had methodically created in the security perimeter. They advanced not with speed, but with deliberate, patient movements, placing each step to avoid triggers, moving only during calculated windows in the patrol patterns. When they reached the vehicle checkpoint, the most exposed position of their approach, Eleanor implemented the next phase of her plan. Rather than attempting to bypass the checkpoint, she created a precision distraction. From her position 200 meters away, Eleanor fired a specialized round not at the guards, but at the transformer box controlling the checkpoint's lighting. The round, designed to create an electrical surge rather than an explosion, caused the lights to flicker and fail, prompting a maintenance response rather than a security alert. In the momentary confusion and darkness, Eleanor and Hayes slipped past the checkpoint, entering the outer perimeter of the facility. Now inside the first layer of security, they faced the greater challenge, accessing the underground complex, where Reed was being held. "Main entrance is too heavily guarded," Hayes whispered as they observed the activity around the mine shaft entrance. "Alternative access?" Eleanor nodded toward a ventilation structure partially concealed by equipment. "Sheds. Environmental control system. All underground facilities require air circulation. Less guarded because the access points are typically too small for human entry." "Typically," Hayes repeated, noting the narrow dimensions of the ventilation. "Shaft, you're thinking we can make it work?" "I know we can." Eleanor produced specialized equipment from her pack, compact breathing apparatus and thermal protection designed for extreme environments. "These will protect us from detection by internal thermal sensors. The shaft is tight, but navigable." The ventilation system proved to be exactly as challenging as Eleanor had anticipated. A claustrophobic, disorienting maze of metal tunnels barely wide enough for an adult body. They moved with agonizing slowness, Eleanor leading with the confidence of someone who had studied the facility's schematics until they were imprinted on her memory. After 40 minutes of confined navigation, they reached a junction point that opened into a maintenance access corridor, now inside the main facility, beyond the most intensive security perimeter. "We're in," Eleanor whispered, checking the specialized device that detected surveillance systems. "Internal security is primarily focused on preventing escape, not infiltration. They never expected anyone to get this far." Hayes consulted the facility map they'd reconstructed based on Reed's transmission and satellite imaging. "Detention level should be 2 floors down, east quadrant." They moved through the facility like shadows, using Eleanor's intimate knowledge of security protocols to avoid detection. When they encountered locked doors, Hayes' security clearance, still valid despite the circumstances, provided access without triggering alerts. The detention level was secured by a biometric system requiring palm print and retinal scan, a barrier that would have stopped most infiltrators. Eleanor, however, produced a device that even Hayes didn't recognize. "Prototype," she explained, as she attached it to the security panel. "Intercepts and replicates the last authorized access signature." The door opened silently, revealing a corridor of specialized containment cells, most empty, but one at the far end secured by additional measures. Inside, visible through a reinforced observation window, was Colonel Marcus Reed. Even from a distance, the changes in Reed were apparent. The once imposing officer appeared diminished, his military bearing replaced by the careful movements of someone who had endured prolonged captivity. When he saw Hayes and Eleanor approaching his cell, his expression registered shock, then cautious hope. Eleanor bypassed the cell's security with the same efficiency she'd shown throughout the infiltration, and within moments Reed was free, though clearly weakened by his ordeal. "Artemis," he greeted her, his voice hoarse. "Still impossible to kill, I see." "Not for lack of trying on your part," she replied without rancor. "What happened, Marcus?" Reed's expression darkened. "Morrison Blackwell approached me after Longshot was officially decommissioned. Said they wanted to preserve the program's research, continue development with private funding. It seemed legitimate. Many military programs transitioned to the private sector. But that wasn't what they really wanted," Hayes prompted. "No, they wanted to weaponize the methodology, create deployable teams of precision eliminators who could operate without government oversight. When I objected, I became their first test subject." Reed gestured to his weakened condition. They've been using what they extract from me to train their teams, enhance their protocols. Eleanor checked her watch. We need to move. How many Nemesis operators are currently in the facility? At least 15, Reed confirmed. Their best teams. Plus support personnel, security staff. And their mission parameters? Hayes asked. Reed's expression was grim. Elimination of all original Longshot personnel, securing of all operational data, then deployment for their first major contract, a coordinated strike against political targets in 3 countries, attributed to terrorist organizations. False flag operations, Eleanor concluded. Creating conflicts that generate more defense contracts. Exactly. Morrison Blackwell profits from both ends, selling the precision elimination services, then securing the reconstruction contracts that follow the conflicts they help create. Eleanor processed this information with the tactical efficiency that had defined her career. We need to do more than just escape. We need to end this operation permanently. The Central Data Core, Reed suggested. Lower level, maximum security. Contains all Nemesis operational data, training protocols, deployment plans. Destroy that, and you cripple their entire program. And put Morrison Blackwell under a spotlight they can't escape, Hayes added. With evidence of their illegal operations exposed. Eleanor nodded, already formulating the approach. First, we get you to safety. Then Hayes and I will handle the data core. Reed shook his head. I'm coming with you. I helped create this monster, however unwillingly. I need to help end it. Despite his weakened condition, Reed's determination was evident. Eleanor assessed him with the clear-eyed pragmatism of a tactical commander, then nodded once. Stay behind us, follow every instruction immediately, no heroics. As they prepared to move deeper into the facility, alarms suddenly blared throughout the complex, not the security breach alert they'd feared, but something else. Deployment sequence, Reed explained, recognizing the pattern. They're mobilizing teams for an operation. The assassination contract has realized. They're moving now. Eleanor's expression hardened with resolve. Then so are we. The deployment alarms changed everything. What had been a careful extraction mission now became a race against time to prevent a coordinated assassination operation that would destabilize entire regions. Eleanor processed this shift with the adaptive precision that had defined her career, immediately recalibrating their approach. New priority, she stated, her voice carrying the quiet authority that had once commanded elite sniper teams. We split up. Hayes, get Reed to the surface and secure extraction. I'll handle the data core. Hayes immediately shook his head. Not happening. We stay together. The mission parameters have changed, Eleanor countered, checking her equipment. With trembling but efficient hands. Nemesis teams deploying means reduced internal security, creating an opportunity we won't have again. But it also means we have limited time before they execute their contract kills. Reed, despite his weakened condition, understood the tactical logic. She's right, Hayes. The data core is in the central security hub, 2 levels down. Maximum protection, but minimum personnel during deployment sequences when resources are directed toward operational support. Eleanor nodded, already plotting her approach. I can reach it. Plant the charges and meet you at the extraction point in 20 minutes. And if you encounter resistance? Hayes challenged. Eleanor's pale eyes met his, a lifetime of shared combat experience passing between them. Then I'll do what I've always done. Adapt and overcome. Something in her expression must have convinced him, because Hayes finally nodded, though reluctantly. 20 minutes. Then we come looking for you. I'd expect nothing less. Eleanor checked her watch, synchronizing with Hayes. Extraction point Alpha and 20, now move. As Hayes led Reed toward the emergency exit route they'd identified during infiltration, Eleanor moved deeper into the facility, following the mental map she'd constructed from their intelligence. The deployment alarms provided unexpected cover. Personnel rushing to support the operation paid little attention to a solitary figure moving purposefully through the corridors. The central security hub was located behind 3 layers of security, each designed to prevent unauthorized access to the heart of the Nemesis operation. Under normal circumstances, breaching these defenses would have required a specialized team with advanced equipment. But circumstances were far from normal, and Eleanor Morgan was far from an ordinary infiltrator. The first layer, a manned security checkpoint, was temporarily abandoned as personnel had been redirected to support the deployment. Eleanor slipped past without resistance, using Reed's access codes to bypass the automated systems. The second layer presented a greater challenge: biometric authentication requiring specific authorized personnel. Eleanor approached this obstacle with the same methodical precision she applied to impossible shots. From her equipment, she produced a specialized device that would have impressed even the most advanced military technical teams: a biometric replicator, using samples collected from the facility's ventilation system. The third and final layer was designed to be impenetrable: a sealed chamber with atmospheric pressure monitoring, weight-sensitive flooring, and constant surveillance. It was a security system designed by people who understood conventional infiltration techniques. What the designers hadn't accounted for was Eleanor's unconventional approach. Rather than attempting to defeat each security measure individually, she created a cascading system failure by introducing a specialized electromagnetic pulse device into the environmental control system, causing the security protocols to reset simultaneously and creating a 3-second window to slip through the final barrier. Inside the central hub, Eleanor found exactly what they'd hoped for: the data core that contained everything related to Project Nemesis. The physical server array hummed with quiet efficiency, storing the operational plans, training protocols, and most importantly, the evidence of Morrison Blackwell's illegal activities. Eleanor worked quickly, placing specialized charges designed to destroy the physical hardware, while simultaneously uploading a virus through the system's maintenance port, ensuring that both local and backed-up data would be corrupted beyond recovery. As she set the final charge, a voice spoke from behind her. "Impressive, Artemis, even with those shaking hands." Eleanor turned slowly, unsurprised to find herself facing a woman she recognized immediately, the same shooter they'd captured at the Montana facility, her shoulder now bandaged but her posture showing no sign of weakness. Behind her stood 2 more operators, their weapons trained on Eleanor with unwavering precision. "Nemesis Alpha Team," Eleanor said calmly, identifying the elite squad from subtle markers in their equipment and positioning. "I was wondering when you'd show up." The woman, clearly the team leader, stepped forward. "We've been tracking you since Montana. Let you penetrate our security, curious to see how far the legendary Artemis could get with her disability." She gestured to Eleanor's trembling hands. "Seems far enough," Eleanor replied, her own hands steady despite their persistent tremor. The team leader studied her with professional assessment. "You know, they use you as a case study in our training. Artemis methodology, the perfect integration of physical capability, environmental awareness, and psychological warfare, though they always emphasize that your techniques died with your career. Reports of my obsolescence have been greatly exaggerated. So I see." The woman circled Eleanor slowly, maintaining tactical distance. "I have to admit, I was skeptical about the stories. The greatest sniper in military history, reduced to hiding in a small town, hands too unsteady to hold a coffee cup. Yet here you are, infiltrating our most secure facility." Eleanor remained motionless, conserving energy, assessing options. "You talk too much. Wasn't in the long-shot training protocols." That earned a smile from the younger woman. "Nemesis improved on long shot in many ways. We're not lone wolves like you were. We're networked, integrated, evolved. Yet you still make rookie mistakes, Eleanor observed. Like having this conversation instead of securing your target. The woman's expression hardened slightly. You're not going anywhere, Artemis. Your time is over. The future belongs to operators who don't rely on individual skill, who can function as components in a greater system. Components, Eleanor repeated, the word carrying weight. Interchangeable parts rather than irreplaceable talent. Exactly. The perfect modern warfare methodology. No heroes, no legends, just precise execution of objectives. Eleanor nodded. Thoughtfully, there's just one problem with that approach. And what's that? It makes you predictable. In the momentary confusion that followed this statement, Eleanor activated the remote detonator concealed in her palm. Not for the charges she'd placed on the data core. Those remained inactive, but for the specialized smoke devices she'd positioned in the ventilation system during her approach. The security hub filled instantly with dense, disorienting smoke, designed to neutralize both standard and thermal optics. In the chaos that followed, Eleanor moved with the practiced efficiency of someone who had trained to operate in zero visibility conditions. The Nemesis team responded with coordinated precision, shifting to predetermined defensive positions, exactly as their protocols would have instructed. But their coordination became a weakness when facing an opponent who had written many of those protocols. Eleanor knew precisely where each operator would move, which angles they would cover, how they would communicate. The first operator fell to a perfectly placed strike to the carotid artery, unconscious before he realized Eleanor had flanked his position. The second detected her approach but fired at a displacement shadow she deliberately created, exposing his position for a precise counterattack. The team leader proved more adaptable, abandoning protocol to engage Eleanor directly in the thinning smoke. They grappled briefly, a contest between youthful strength and decades of combat experience. Despite her age and her trembling hands, Eleanor moved with the fluid efficiency of someone who had never stopped training, never surrendered to limitations. When the smoke cleared completely, Eleanor stood alone among three unconscious nemesis operators, her breathing controlled, her trembling hands now holding the team leader's sidearm. Components can be replaced, she said to the empty air. Experience can't. Eleanor secured the Nemesis team with their own restraints, then returned to the data core to complete her original mission. But as she prepared to destroy the servers, a different approach occurred to her, one that offered more comprehensive justice than simple destruction. Instead of detonating the charges, Eleanor initiated a complete data transfer to a secure device she carried, copying everything before introducing a virus that would corrupt the original servers beyond recovery. Not destruction, but appropriation. Taking control of the evidence that would dismantle Morrison Blackwell's entire operation. With the data secured and the Nemesis team neutralized, Eleanor made her way toward the extraction point, moving through the facility with renewed urgency. The 20-minute window she'd given Hayes was nearly expired, and the deployment sequence would soon be complete, after which security would return to maximum alert. She reached the emergency exit route with 2 minutes to spare, finding Hayes and Reed waiting with barely concealed concern. Cutting it close, Hayes observed as she joined them. Eleanor held up the data device. That's something better than destruction. Complete operational files, client lists, financial records, everything needed to dismantle not just Nemesis, but the entire illegal operation. Reed's eyes widened at the implication. That's years of intelligence. Enough to take down half the private military infrastructure and prevent the assassination operation? Hayes asked. Eleanor nodded. The deployment coordinates are included. We can alert authorities at the target locations, anonymously, through secure channels. They'll still send their teams, Reed warned. Morrison Blackwell has too much Invested to abort now. Then we give them something more immediate to worry about, Eleanor replied, her expression determined as they began moving through the emergency exit tunnel toward the surface. The extraction proceeded with methodical efficiency, Eleanor leading them through blind spots in the perimeter security she'd identified during infiltration. Despite Reed's weakened condition, they made steady progress toward the concealed location, where Eleanor had hidden their vehicle during the approach. They were within 200 meters of extraction when the facility's alarms changed tone. The deployed teams had discovered the neutralized Nemesis Alpha Squad and the compromised data core. Full lockdown protocol, Reed identified the alarm. Pattern: they're sealing all access points, deploying all reserve personnel to secure the perimeter. Eleanor calculated options with practice speed. We need a diversion. The operation was compromised from within. He swiped to another image: thermal surveillance, showing a figure moving through the embassy compound during the extraction. This individual accessed secure communications during the operation and transmitted classified tactical data to an unknown receiver. Eleanor studied the image, her tactical mind automatically analyzing movement patterns and physical characteristics despite the low-resolution thermal imagery. One of yours. That is what we need to determine. Hargrove leaned forward. The data they accessed included personnel files on a classified program called Longshot. The name sent a cold shock through Eleanor's system, though her expression remained neutral. Longshot had been the Black Ops sniper program she had helped develop before her official death, a program that had identified and trained the most exceptional marksmen in military history, including a young William Hayes. Longshot was decommissioned 15 years ago, she said carefully. Officially, yes. Unofficially, the program continued under different management. New protocols, new personnel, same objective: creating precision shooters capable of making the impossible shot. Hargrove's expression darkened. Someone is systematically eliminating Longshot graduates. 3 have died in the past month. Precision kills at extreme ranges using techniques only taught in the program. Eleanor's mind raced through implications. And Hayes is the next target, we believe. The embassy situation may have been designed to expose his location and force him into the open. Hargrove slid a folder across the table. These are the incident reports. The pattern is unmistakable. Someone is hunting Longshot snipers using their own techniques against them. Eleanor opened the folder, her trembling fingers moving methodically through the reports. 3 shooters dead, each killed with a single shot from distances exceeding 1,500 meters. No ballistic evidence recovered, no witnesses. Who is running Longshot now? She asked, her voice deceptively calm. Colonel Marcus Reed. He was your replacement after your departure. Eleanor stiffened slightly. Reed had been her second in command. A brilliant shooter, but overly ambitious with theories about sniper warfare that she had found ethically questionable. Reed would not eliminate his own assets. Perhaps not voluntarily. Hargrove brought up another file. Reed disappeared 3 weeks ago while on leave. His cabin in Colorado was found empty, signs of struggle, blood evidence matching his type. We believe whoever is targeting Longshot graduates took Reed first, possibly to extract operational information. The pieces clicked into place with sickening clarity. They are using Reed's knowledge to hunt down his snipers. Precisely. And now they know Hayes is alive. Hargrove's expression was grim. We need to get to him before they do. Eleanor closed the folder, her decision already made. Where is he now? Being transported to a secure facility in Montana. Remote location, minimal personnel to reduce infiltration risk. Hargrove paused. Approximately 30 miles from Whispering Pines. Of course it was. Nothing in Eleanor's life had ever been coincidental. You want me to protect him? Not a question. I want you to catch whoever is hunting Longshot. Hayes is the bait. Hargrove met her gaze directly. You are the only sniper alive with the skills to counter someone trained by Reed. Except Reed himself, Eleanor pointed out. If he is still alive. Eleanor considered her options, though she knew she had already decided the moment Hayes was mentioned. She owed him too much to walk away, even if it meant stepping back into a world she had left behind. I will need complete operational autonomy. My equipment, my protocols, no interference. Hargrove nodded. Granted. And when this is over, I disappear. Again, permanently. New identity, new location, all records of Eleanor Morgan and Artemis erased. That can be arranged. Eleanor picked up her rifle case. Then let us go hunting. The Montana Safe House was a former ranger station, nestled in a valley, surrounded by forested ridges, defensible, but with too many potential sniper positions for Eleanor's comfort. The facility had been retrofitted with modern security systems, but to her tactical eye, it remained vulnerable to the kind of long-range, precision attack that had killed 3 long-shot graduates already. Eleanor arrived shortly before sunset, her truck following the unmarked SUV that had escorted her from the private airfield. As she stepped out into the chill mountain air, she immediately began cataloging sight lines, calculating distances to ridge positions, identifying vulnerabilities. A security team waited at the main entrance, led by a compact, serious-faced woman who introduced herself simply as Director Collins. Ms. Morgan Collins greeted her with professional respect. "General Hayes is expecting you." Eleanor nodded her eyes, still scanning the surrounding terrain. "Your security perimeter is insufficient. You have at least 7 unmonitored approach vectors from the northern ridgeline." Collins's expression remained neutral. "We have established sniper detection systems, covering all approaches beyond 800 meters. The shots that killed your long-shot graduates were all taken from beyond 1,500 meters, Eleanor countered. Whoever is hunting them will not approach within your detection range." Something flickered in Collins's eyes, concern perhaps, or recognition that she was dealing with someone who understood the threat better than she did. "We will adjust our perimeter." "Do it now." Eleanor shouldered her bag. "And I want topographical maps of the entire region, weather reports for the next 72 hours, and a direct line to your security stations." Inside the facility hummed with quiet efficiency communications equipment, security monitors, and a small but well-equipped tactical team. In the central operations room, standing over a digital terrain map, was William Hayes. He looked up as she entered, and for a moment, the years seemed to fall away. Despite the silver threading his dark hair and the new lines etched around his eyes, he was still the sharp-eyed captain she had mentored decades ago. "Eleanor." He stepped forward, his handshake firm, his eyes warm with genuine respect. "Thank you for coming. You knew I would," she replied simply. Hayes nodded, understanding the weight of their shared history. "I have been briefed on the situation. 3 of our people dead, Reed missing. And you are next on the list." Eleanor set her rifle case on the table, the familiar way to comfort in this uncertain scenario. "Unless we catch them first." Hayes gestured to the terrain map. "Collins has established security protocols based on standard sniper countermeasures, but standard will not be enough," Eleanor finished. "Whoever is doing this was trained by Reed, which means they know exactly how to circumvent standard protocols." She studied the digital topography, her trained eye identifying potential firing positions, calculating distances and angles. The tremor in her hand seemed more pronounced under Hayes' watchful gaze, but she ignored it, focusing on the tactical problem before her. "There," she said, pointing to a ridge approximately 1,700 meters northwest of the facility. "That is where I would set up if I were targeting this building. Clear line of sight to the main structure, protected position, with multiple egress routes, elevation advantage." Hayes examined the position. "That is beyond effective range for most shooters. Not for a long-shot graduate." Eleanor met his gaze. "And not for whoever is hunting them." She began issuing orders with the natural authority of someone accustomed to Command despite having left the military 15 years earlier. The security team responded instinctively to her expertise, adjusting their perimeter, establishing new monitoring protocols, preparing contingencies. As night fell, Eleanor claimed a small room overlooking the northern approach, converting it into an impromptu sniper nest. She unpacked her custom rifle with methodical precision, assembling it piece by piece despite her trembling hands. Hayes watched from the doorway, his expression thoughtful. "The tremors," he said finally. "How long?" Eleanor continued her work without looking up. "Started about 8 years ago. Progressive neurological condition, the doctors say. Likely from exposure to certain chemical agents during our operations in Kazakhstan. Yet you made those shots in Turkey. 6 kills 1,600 meters through glass with hands that shake like that." Hayes shook his head in quiet amazement. "How?" Eleanor finished mounting the scope before responding. "The tremors are consistent, rhythmic. I learned to time my shots to the pattern, firing in the microsecond between tremors. That is necessary," she interrupted. "I adapted because I had to." Hayes nodded, understanding the steel-willed determination that had always defined her. "Just like you taught us. Obstacles are variables to be calculated, not excuses to fail." A ghost of a smile touched Eleanor's lips. "You were paying attention. Best teacher I ever had." Hayes moved into the room, studying the security feed she had established. "Do you think it is Reed? Could he have broken under interrogation started hunting his own people?" Eleanor considered the possibility. Reed was always ideological, believed in the purity of the perfect shot, but he was loyal to the program. She shook her head slightly. "If he is involved, it is not willingly." "Then who?" "We will know when they make their move." Reed nodded in agreement. "They used my research, my training protocols to create assassination teams for hire. I have a responsibility to help dismantle what they have built." Eleanor studied them both, Hayes with his unwavering integrity, despite decades in a system that rewarded compromise, Reed with his brilliant tactical mind and determination to atone for unwitting complicity. Together they represented the best of what Longshot had been intended to be: precision, discipline, and purpose directed toward protection rather than profit. "It will not be easy," she warned them. "We will be operating without official sanction, targeted by both private military interests and potentially governmental agencies compromised by those interests. We will need to remain ghosts, invisible, untraceable, but always watching." "Sounds familiar," Hayes replied with a slight smile. "Was not that the original Longshot operational directive? Invisible presence, decisive action." Eleanor nodded, remembering the principles she had helped establish decades earlier, before bureaucracy and politics corrupted the program. "Then maybe it is time to restore the original vision," Reed suggested. "Not as a military program, but as an independent counterbalance to operations like Nemesis." The idea resonated with something Eleanor had considered during her years of self-imposed exile: the need for oversight beyond institutional boundaries, accountability enforced by those who understood the systems they were monitoring. "A ghost squadron," she said thoughtfully, "operating in the shadows to expose those who abuse similar capabilities." "With the most lethal sniper in history leading the operation," Hayes added, "despite what some might consider a disability." Eleanor glanced down at her trembling hands that had been mocked and dismissed, yet had recently made shots that the world's most elite operators had deemed impossible. "Not despite the tremors," she corrected. "With them, sometimes what others perceive as weakness becomes strength when properly understood and adapted to." As the aircraft carried them toward temporary safety, Eleanor began outlining the framework for their new mission: a precisely calibrated operation to systematically expose and dismantle the shadowy world of privatized military operations that had evolved beyond ethical constraints. 3 months later, Morrison Blackwell faced congressional investigation. Their stock in freefall as evidence of illegal operations became public through carefully orchestrated information releases. Senior executives faced criminal charges. Military contracts were suspended, and the companies carefully constructed political protection crumbled under the weight of irrefutable evidence. Project Nemesis was officially terminated. Its operational teams disbanded, its training facilities shuttered. But the wider network of similar programs remained: other companies, other contractors, other versions of the same fundamental corruption of military capability for private profit. In a remote cabin outside Vancouver, Eleanor Morgan studied intelligence reports with the same methodical precision she applied to long-range shooting. Her trembling hands sorted photographs, financial records, and operational data, piecing together the framework of their next target. Hayes entered the room carrying fresh coffee for both of them. Satellite imagery confirmed your suspicion. Clearwater Defense has established a training facility in northern Idaho. Operational parameters consistent with Nemesis protocols. Eleanor nodded, accepting the coffee, despite knowing her trembling hands would make drinking it challenging. Reed's analysis of their financial structure shows the same pattern: segregated operational funding, compartmentalized oversight, deniable command structure. Another nemesis by a different name, Hayes concluded, sitting across from her. With one critical difference, Eleanor added. They know we are out here now. Their security will be enhanced, their operational security tightened, making our job more difficult. Eleanor smiled slightly, the expression carrying decades of hard-won wisdom, making it more interesting. Challenges keep skills sharp, even with hands that shake. Hayes studied her with undisguised admiration. You know the recruits used to tell stories about you, the legendary Artemis who could make impossible shots in impossible conditions. I always thought they were exaggerating. They probably were, Eleanor replied pragmatically. Legends grow with distance. Maybe. Or maybe they understood something fundamental about you that even you did not recognize. Hayes gestured to her trembling hands, that it was never about physical stability. It was about adapting to whatever variable life presented, refusing to accept limitation as definition. Eleanor considered this perspective, seeing truth in it she had not fully acknowledged. Throughout her career, her greatest strength had never been physical prowess, but adaptability, the capacity to recalculate, recalibrate, and overcome whatever obstacles emerged. Perhaps she conceded. Though I suspect the legend was more comforting than the reality. The reality sitting across from me is far more impressive than any legend, Hayes countered. A 67-year-old woman with hands that shake like leaves. In a storm, who still made the shot that saved a general's life, exposed a corrupt military contractor, and is now leading the most effective covert accountability operation I have ever seen. Eleanor's hands trembled as she raised her coffee cup, but her eyes were steady with purpose as she considered their next mission. The tremors remind me of something important, William. What is that? That imperfection does not equal incapability. That adaptation overcomes limitation. That what others mock as weakness often conceals extraordinary strength. She set down her cup, returning her attention to the intelligence before them. Now let us plan our next impossible shot. As they worked into the night, mapping out the operation that would expose another corrupt military contractor, Eleanor's trembling hands continued their constant motion, not a liability, but a reminder that true strength comes not from physical perfection, but from the relentless refusal to be defined by limitation. The woman they had once mocked for her shaky hands had become their most formidable adversary, proving with each impossible shot that greatness is not about what holds you back, but about how you move forward despite it. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.